I worked at a 24-hour gas station on a busy road. The night shift was always lonely, with only a few drivers stopping for gas. The routine was peaceful, although the nocturnal sounds of the road, the headlights of passing cars, and the silence that filled the gaps created a peculiar atmosphere. I spent most of my time alone, watching the sparse movement or reading a book to pass the time. The station itself was modest, with 2 gas pumps, a small convenience store, and a dimly lit bathroom that was rarely used. My only constant companions were the hum of the refrigerators and the occasional noise of the wind shaking the metal structure of the roof. It was a simple job, but there was a constant restlessness. The darkness seemed to swallow everything around, and any unusual noise made my heart race. However, nothing truly scary ever happened. Until that specific night. That night, a strange calm hung in the air. I was about to finish organizing the convenience store shelves when I heard the sound of an engine approaching. I looked out the window and saw an old, rusty car park near the fuel pumps. The vehicle looked like it came out of a horror movie, with peeling paint and opaque headlights. A man got out of the car. He had a peculiar appearance, with worn-out clothes and a hat that hid part of his face. His movements were nervous, and he was looking at the gas station strangely, almost as if he was trying to decide something. I approached the cashier, trying to maintain a friendly expression as he headed to the pump to get gas. As I watched, I noticed he was constantly looking my way, his dark, piercing eyes analyzing me. After filling up, he slowly walked to the store entrance. When he entered, the bell on the door sounded louder than usual, like a harbinger of something bad. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he began walking through the store's narrow aisles, picking up objects and putting them back, all with a disdainful expression. "Have you seen anyone around here? Someone you don't recognize?" He finally broke the silence, his voice low and husky. "No, just some regular drivers," I responded, feeling a shiver run down my body. His eyes fixed on me in a way that made my stomach turn. "Are you sure?" he insisted, approaching the counter, his presence becoming more and more threatening. "Yes, I'm sure," I said, trying to remain calm. He smiled disturbingly, shook his head, and left the store without buying anything. The feeling of unease didn't go away when he was gone. On the contrary, it seemed like he had left something sinister behind. I returned to my post behind the counter, trying to shake off the feeling of discomfort. I looked out the window and saw that the man's car was parked across the street. He was there, inside the car, watching me. My heart started to beat faster. Minutes passed like hours. Then, without warning, he got out of the car and started walking towards the station again, this time with purposeful steps and a sinister expression on his face. I ran to lock the store door, my hands shaking as I dialed the police number. The man began banging on the store door, his fists colliding with the glass in a frantic and desperate manner. He screamed incoherent words, his features contorted with hatred and madness. The feeling of being trapped and vulnerable intensified with every second. "Hello? Police? There's a man trying to force his way into the gas station on the main road here. Please, come quick." My voice shook as I explained the situation, my gaze fixed on the intruder. "We're on our way. Stay safe and don't open the door for any reason," the police dispatcher replied, but the sense of relief was minimal compared to the growing dread. The man now used a heavy object, perhaps a tool he took from the trunk of the car, to try to break down the door. The glass vibrated with the impacts, threatening to give way at any moment. I hid behind the counter, holding the phone like it was a lifeline. The sound of the blows became deafening, and I could see the first cracks forming in the glass. My breathing was heavy, and sweat was running down my face. Every second felt like an eternity, and the anguish of waiting for help was overwhelming. Then, suddenly, an intense light illuminated the inside of the store, accompanied by the sound of a car quickly approaching. I looked outside and saw blinding headlights. A loud, authoritative voice shouted, "Hey, get out of there!" He was a local, someone I recognized by sight. He got out of the car and ran towards the attacker, brandishing a large flashlight as if it were a weapon. The man hesitated, looked at the newcomer and, realizing that his attempt to break in had been thwarted, fled towards the rusty car and sped down the road. The local resident ran to the door and helped me open it. He was panting but managed to calm me down as I came out of my hiding spot. "Are you okay?" "I called the police too. They should be arriving." He took me inside his house, where he offered me water and a place to sit. The police arrived shortly after, examined the scene, and collected security camera footage. They were very helpful, but something told me that the nightmare was far from over. Despite efforts to identify the attacker through images and a lineup of suspects, I was unable to recognize him. He seemed to be a ghost, always lurking. The man remained free, and the feeling of being targeted by someone with malicious intentions continued to haunt me. Since that night, the early shift at the gas station has never been the same for me. I was always on alert, my senses heightened to any unusual sound or movement. One night, while reviewing security camera footage as I had done religiously since the attack, I noticed something that had previously gone unnoticed. In one of the recordings, a few days after the incident, the strange man's rusty car drove slowly past the gas station, without stopping. It was a subtle but terrifying reminder that he was still around, watching. I couldn't continue living like this. I talked to my superiors and got a transfer to a day shift in another unit. The change helped, but the memory of that night and the man's disturbing face still haunt my dreams. I work the night shift as an app driver. The deserted streets and stillness of the city during these hours bring me a strange sense of calm. I like the silence interrupted only by the sound of the car engine and, occasionally, conversations with passengers. I meet people from all walks of life and hear stories that range from the banal to the fascinating. However, it was on one of those nights, on a dimly lit corner in a remote neighborhood, that I picked up a passenger who changed my life forever. That night started like any other. My app beeped with a new ride, and I drove to the meeting place. The woman was standing in the dim light of a streetlight, looking around as if expecting something bad to happen at any moment. As she got into the car, I realized that she was visibly agitated, almost shaking. Trying to ease the tension, I asked a casual question about her destination. "Where are we going?" I asked with a smile on my face. She hesitated for a moment, looking in the rearview mirror before responding in a low, shaky voice. Just take me to a safe place. Please, I'm being followed." I thought it was an exaggeration or momentary paranoia. It happens more often than you might think, especially at night. I decided the best way to handle the situation was to stay calm and do my job. "All right, I'll take you to a safe place." "Stay calm," I replied, trying to convey confidence. As I drove, I watched her in the rearview mirror. She continued to look back, and her breathing was heavy. My curiosity began to turn into mild uneasiness. As we advanced through the empty streets, I began to notice a car that seemed to be following the same route as ours. It kept a constant distance, its lights highlighted in my rearview mirror. I decided not to comment immediately, thinking it might just be a coincidence. But with every turn or change of direction, the car continued behind us. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to sound unconcerned. She just shook her head, her eyes still fixed on the window. Her phone vibrated and she quickly picked it up, reading the message with an expression that became even more tense. I could see the glare from the screen reflecting off her face, and the fear in her eyes was evident. Then she said, He knows where we are." I asked her who she was talking about, and she responded by pointing to the car that was still following us. "Him, the man who's chasing me. He's after us." I needed to think of something quickly. I turned on the radio, pretending it was just another normal night as my brain worked frantically to find a solution. "We have to go to a busy place," I suggested. "A place where he can't do anything without attracting attention." She nodded, still holding the phone as if it were a protective amulet. I made a sharp turn, trying to lose the car that was following us. For a moment I thought we had made it, but then the lights appeared in the mirror again. The chase was getting more and more intense. Each street we took seemed more deserted and darker than the last. The woman next to me received incessant messages, each one more threatening than the last. She showed me one that said, "You won't escape." The tension in the car was almost unbearable. The man following us was becoming more and more aggressive, trying to get closer and closer. The deserted streets of the city at night seemed like a maze with no way out. I needed to do something, and quickly. I asked her to hold on tight. I sped up, trying to create a significant distance between us and the pursuer. I made sudden turns, accelerated in straight lines, and even ran a red light, all in a desperate attempt to lose that man. But he didn't give up. "He won't stop," muttered the woman, almost to herself, as she held the seat belt tightly. Suddenly I heard a loud sound of metal clashing. The pursuer had hit our car, trying to force us to stop. The impact was strong, making my heart race even more. I knew we couldn't go on like this for long. I needed help. I dialed the emergency number, and the operator told me to keep the line open and continue driving until a vehicle could reach us. Meanwhile, the pursuer was trying to force us off the road again. Fear was now visible in the woman's eyes, but I couldn't let it win. Speeding up again, I saw the lights of a gas station lit up in the distance. It was my only chance. "Let's go to that station," I shouted. "There are people there. He won't do anything with witnesses around." I arrived at the gas station, stopping suddenly and honking my horn frantically to attract attention. The pursuer hesitated for a moment, probably calculating the risks of remaining there. It was at that moment that I heard police sirens approaching. The police arrived quickly, blocking the stalker's car and ordering him to get out with his hands up. The man was handcuffed and taken away, with his gaze fixed on us, full of hatred. The woman next to me began to cry with relief, and I felt my muscles relax for the first time since she got into my car. My night shift job as a security guard at a cargo warehouse in a busy port was always monotonous. Most of the time, I just walked among the stacked containers, checking locks and making sure nothing was out of place. The routine was comforting, almost therapeutic. The depot, with its dim lights and long shadows, had a peculiar silence at night, broken only by the occasional sound of waves lapping against the pier and the creaking of moored ships. The salty air and the smell of diesel fuel were my constant companions. In my first few months, I always wondered what each container held. Sometimes I let my mind wander, imagining hidden treasures or exotic goods from faraway places. But on one specific night, something broke the monotony. It was around 2 in the morning, and the thick fog stretched across the port, making everything even more misty and mysterious. I was doing my usual rounds when I noticed a slightly open container. It was unusual, as everyone was supposed to be locked and sealed until the dockers arrived in the morning. I approached slowly, my footsteps echoing in the darkness. A strange feeling of apprehension began to grow inside me. As I got closer, I heard a muffled, almost imperceptible sound coming from inside the container. My heart started to beat faster, but I knew I needed to investigate. After all, that was my job. I took a deep breath and, with the flashlight in hand, carefully opened the container. Light flickered in the dark interior, initially revealing only stacked boxes. But then, my eyes adjusted, and I saw a man huddled in the corner. He was visibly shaken. His clothes were dirty and torn, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in days. I asked him if he was okay. He raised his head slowly, his eyes wide with fear. He asked me for help and said that someone had put him there, but that he had escaped before they locked the door. I didn't understand at the time what he was trying to say. The gravity of the situation began to unfold in my mind. I was there alone with a man who claimed to have been kidnapped. My training hadn't prepared me for something like this. Before I could respond, a distant sound of footsteps echoed in the warehouse. I quickly turned off the flashlight and pulled the man into a darker corner of the container. Seconds later, two men appeared at the entrance to the warehouse. They looked around with predatory expressions, clearly looking for something or someone. "I know he's here. We need to find him before he calls the police," said one of them. I looked at the man next to me, who was visibly shaking, and realized that we were in a very dangerous situation. I needed to act quickly to protect both of us. I grabbed my radio and, trying not to make any noise, began calling for backup. But before the transmission could finish, the men found us. They demanded that I hand over the man, threatening me with violence. I knew I couldn't let them take the man back, so I decided to buy time until the police arrived. "He's not going anywhere," I declared, trying to sound more confident than I actually felt. "The police are already on their way." The men looked at each other, a look of panic appearing on their faces. One of them approached, wielding a knife. "This doesn't have to end badly for you, security. Just hand the guy over and we'll be gone." I swallowed hard, keeping my gaze steady. Couldn't give in. If I handed the man over, he probably wouldn't survive. Adrenaline was running through my veins, and the only thing I could do was resist and protect the victim. The sound of sirens got closer, but it seemed like time was standing still. Suddenly, one of the kidnappers rushed at me, trying to knock me down. I fought with all my strength, using the training I had, but the knife was a constant threat. I felt sweat running down my forehead, my heart beating out of control. The other kidnapper held the man, trying to drag him back into the container. In the midst of the struggle, I managed to drop the knife and scream for help. The sound of sirens finally reached the warehouse, red and blue lights illuminating the darkness. The police invaded the place, ordering the kidnappers to surrender. The men tried to escape, but were quickly captured and handcuffed. The feeling of relief was overwhelming. I sat on the floor, panting, while the police rescued the man and carried him to safety. He was still in shock, but alive. The police arrested the kidnappers and took them away, while I stood there, trying to process everything that had happened. The psychological impact of that event hit me deeply. I learned that as a security guard, being aware and prepared was crucial, not only for my safety but also for the safety of others.